today is, as I said, it's webinar Firewall 2.0. We had introduced webinars, the firewall, sorry, and last time we measured on Z3200S. The RIGI firewalls named, or the part numbers is RG-Wall 1600. Now from there we have the different models, so Z5100S and Z3200S. So the Z3200S is the entry level firewall. So this is what we've been covering extensively. Now RIGI, they also have a Z5100S, which is a higher model. This is a higher model. So if the network is beyond the capacity of Z3200S, that's when we introduce Z5100S. Okay. Now under the hood, they all run RIGI. They run RIGI. The operating system is still RIGI, is the same. The operability is still the same. Okay, the functionality is still the same, just that some they are different in terms of capacity. That's what we're going to also talk about, the differences between the two models. All right, so without much ado, let's introduce, okay, generally what a firewall is. Yeah, we might be just throwing the word firewall around yeah, without actually describing what a firewall entails, and this is what defines the difference between a network firewall and a network router or a gateway. Okay, so a firewall is basically a network device, okay, or either a hardware or a software, yeah, that controls traffic in or out of a network. Yeah, so it literally is a gateway to the network. It determines who gets in, who gets out, who does what in the network. Yeah, so it's like a security personnel at the gate. Okay, so a gateway normally is the typical gate, but the firewall, I would call it a security person who literally determines who gets in or who gets out at any given point. So it goes an extra step, by goes an extra step to literally authenticate the devices that are getting in or out, and also even checking the traffic, so the packets that are coming in, the packets that are going out. And this is now where it determines which packets to get in, which packets to drop, which packets to block, and such. Okay, so literally it's very important. Right now we are dealing at this age where internet and connectivity is rampant. Apologies guys, I was letting some people in. Yeah, right now there is connectivity almost everywhere, so the internet connectivity is rampant. So we are not talking about people connecting to the internet anymore. We are talking about now securing those network connections. Okay, because it is important. As much as people have access, we also need to limit, and secure the network devices and information. All right, so let me just cover a very important thing between a traditional firewall and a next generation firewall. So a typical traditional firewall blocks traffic based on IP source, destination IP addresses, and probably ports. If it goes a step higher, is maybe the protocols. Yeah, so that's what a traditional or a stateful firewall does. So it blocks traffic based on that information, and most of that information is normally labeled on the packets. If you remember how information goes, it is transmitted in data as data packets. So traditionally, firewalls would just read, the labeling on the packets, maybe the source IP, the destination IP, then corresponds that with the policies. So if it says block, traffic from this subnet, so it's just going to check the IP address and drop that, or maybe block this port, it will just do that. It wasn't going any step further. Now the next generation firewalls nowadays, they are clever. I would call them intelligent or clever. They are controlling the traffic based on not only the IP addresses and the ports. It's still doing that, but it goes a step further and inspects the packets that are being transmitted. So it actually unboxes. We can call it unboxing the packets. It unboxes the packets and checks what is inside. All right, so it's not just blocking based on the port numbers. It's going a step deeper and looking at actually the traffic. So if it's YouTube, it's not just checking at the port number, it's looking at the actual content inside the packets. So this becomes important in being able to block antiviruses, because ransomware, most of these attacks are embedded inside the packets themselves. They are not on the, let me call it labeling or packaging. Most of these attacks, they are inside the packet itself. So the firewalls are able to go a step further, unbox packet or data information, and see what is actually inside before dropping or allowing it inside the network. All right, so just like we had covered on the Z3200S, the Z5100S also supports these three modes. The most obvious ones is the router mode, and the commonly used is the router mode. So the firewall acts as a firewall and as well as the gateway. So it is the gate itself and also the gate man, in that. So the other one is the transparent mode. So this mode is not common but still very much applicable, where the firewall sits in between the gateway. So the gateway is making all the routing decisions, all right, and probably is also issuing the DHCP or IP addresses. So it is the DHCP server. So the firewall at this point, we can call it more or less like a switch. So it's just, you know receiving the packets and inspecting the packets and then allowing them to continue. It's not making any other decision beyond packet inspection. The other one is the bypass mode. So this is where it's actually not sitting in between the gateway and the core switch. So it is on the side, and as such, it does not affect. So when it's on the bypass mode, it's not consuming any network resources at all. So it's more of mirroring. So normally what happens is you would configure that port to mirror on the switch to mirror the egress port. So the port that is going to the gateway and the port that is going to the firewall are mirrored to each other. So it's actually seeing whatever is passing through. So at this point, I don't know how effective it is. I've never seen a situation where it's on bypass mode, but it supports that. There is that mode on the switch. So if you have a need for that, you don't want the firewall to interfere in any way in the active network, maybe you just want to collect data, then there is that mode. Okay, so normally we also have a DMZ, but a DMZ would be categorized somewhere in between. We can call it a router mode when it's in a DMZ. So it's a gateway in that DMZ network. So it's not analyzing the traffic to the whole network to or from the main or internal network. It's maybe sitting somewhere behind. What we have is just servers behind the firewall. So that it would be that we can call it the DMZ, where it's just allowing or denying requests to that particular server. So this is probably for people who have servers that are hosting their websites and they don't want their servers to be inside their networks. So they put the server in a DMZ somewhere so that people from the internet can access the server and people from the network can as well access the server without the request coming inside the main network. So those are the main modes, and this cuts across most of other firewalls. It's not limited to RUIGI. This is more of a networking concept. Now, this is the firewall we've been covering, the next generation entry level firewall, Z200S. This is how it looks physically versus also the physical interfaces. All right, so this comes with 8 LAN port 1 gig Ethernet ports, and also one 1G SFP ports and a 10G SFP interface. Okay, it also comes with USB ports and also a hard drive compartment behind there, so you can also plug in a hard disk. Comes in very handy. We are going to cover that where you need an actual physical hard disk. So now let's compare it to the bigger brother, the Z5100S. This is how it looks like. Still the same 8 LAN ports, but now on the SFP ports we get some additions. So you have two 1 gig SFP ports and four 10 gig SFP interfaces. So this one, it means it can carry more data. It has interfaces that supports more throughputs in it. Now you see one of the key differences between the two is the extension slots. Yeah, so this extension slots, you can slot in more interfaces. So if for any reason the interfaces offered are not enough, you can literally just buy and plug in the extension ports. So here you can decide, maybe if it's SFP ports, you can just get an extension that has full SFP ports, or you can get one that has gigabit Ethernet ports as well. So it's your choice. So you get two for expanding the network. Also, still comes standard with one hard disk slot, so you can also slap that in. For this one, you also get an extra power module slot. Yeah, so the Z200S comes with one power port. So what that means is you have one single point of failure in terms of power. But now for this one, if it's in a very critical operations, you can do two power modules and maybe connect the two power modules to different power sources. So in case one goes down, you are still online. You're still online. Okay. Now the key difference between the two actually is in terms of the traffic or the firewall throughput. Now this is where we start noticing the differences between the two. The ports is one, but now the operability, the functionality, we get the differences here on the throughput. Now on the Z200S, you can do raw throughput of 10 gig. So that's raw throughput. You're not doing any packets inspection, you're not doing any blocking. It's purely traffic that is passing through. It's maybe like at this point it's just acting as a gateway or a router. All it's doing is getting traffic, enforcing a few policies, and then routing out that traffic. So that's when you get the 10 Gbps. On the Z5100S, you get 15 Gbps. So that's an upgrade. Now the firewall mix the mixed traffic. So this is where you start um, enforcing a few policies. So you're blocking maybe HTTP, HTTPS, DNS, VoIP. So at this point, you are not doing any deep packet inspection, but now at least you're enforcing a few policies in here. Yeah, you're enforcing a few policies in here. So in the IPS throughput, this is where you're enabling the intrusion prevention. So you at this point, the firewall is inspecting packets for attacks, exploits, people who have now embedded the attack. So hackers, they normally use this, so they'll use the IPS, so they'll embed a few a few malicious packets or data in your packets. Yeah, so the firewall at this point is doing packets inspection. The next generation firewall traffic, in this now this is where the deep inspection comes in, and as you can see now at this point, it literally degrades the firewall. So you're coming from doing 15 Gbps of raw data to doing around 1.6 Gbps. Yeah, so at this point you are literally you're pushing your CPU limits. But now this is where the actual security or the need for a firewall comes in, because you buy a firewall so that you can enforce more security. So the next generation firewall traffic, this is what you're going to be getting with these firewalls if you are running deep packet inspection. So the last one is the threat protection. So this is where you're literally enforcing everything in the network. So from IPS, you're doing application controls, you're doing network level antivirus, you are doing URL filtering. So this is you're running the whole portfolio, the whole suite, security suite, using the threat protection. So what you see is, for example, the new firewall, the Z5100S, when you're running the full suite, and at this point you need licenses, security licenses to do this. Now, assuming you've bought the hardware and you've slapped in um, the licenses, the security licenses, you're going to get, and when everything is running maximally, you're going to get around 1 Gbps of traffic. So from 15 to 1 Gbps of traffic, still quite high. Now, if that's not enough, you can now extend. You can buy an expansion license, which will give you up to 2 Gbps. So what you are seeing here is the first number, which is, for example, on the traffic mix, which is 3. That means standard it comes with 3. You are going to get 3 Gbps worth of mixed traffic. IPS you're going to get 1.8 Gbps. Yeah. Now, if you feel that is not enough, now you can add the expansion licenses. You can push that traffic to around 4 Gbps, but standard you get around 1.8 of IPS. So this is actually the key differences between the two. So it's more of the traffic that they can push, but under the hood they are still doing the same in terms of security. This is the throughput expansion licenses I was talking about. So for example, the Z200S comes with 1 gig of mixed traffic. So you can, once you upgrade the license, you're going to get up to 3 gig. The Z5100 is the same. You get 3 gig of mixed traffic. You can push that up to 10 gig with the performance license. Okay, so that's that with the licensing on the performance. So we are talking about throughput at this point, not security. So now we are going to go to the actual security enforcement. So we are talking about the antiviruses. Now this is the subscription, the licensing. This is what you buy with a 1-year license. So our licenses comes with these 5 features bundled in one. So we have IPS, we have antivirus. This antivirus is the network level, not the endpoint. So this is not the one that you install in your endpoint device like a laptop or computer. This is network level. We've got threat intelligence. We also have URL filtering. We have application recognition and control. Okay, so the first one, let's talk about the IPS, that is intrusion prevention. So with this, normally monitor network traffic and block attacks in real time. So that's actually what intrusion prevention means. Okay, so this one does deep packet inspections and detects patterns, so malicious patterns, because what hackers do, they normally do, they have a pattern. So they normally read how people are using the network or the internet. Then they start embedding their malicious codes inside your packet. So the IPS normally does that. So it also observes malware behaviors, port scans, and suspicious payloads. Okay. So when it does detect a threat, normally, so at this point you are enforcing the policy. So you tell it when it detects such kind of a payload, what it does. So it either blocks, drops, or reroutes the traffic, and probably will send you an alarm. We are going to see that in the physical device. Okay. So this one normally continues updating the attack. Okay, so based, if you're receiving the attacks, you continuously receiving the attack. Now this is where the next generation feature comes in. It keeps updating itself. Yeah, it doesn't need you to go there and update it. It will be showing you the kind of attacks you're receiving, but it's also updating itself. Yeah, so it's also, we can call it remapping its own at security mechanism to match what the attackers are doing. Okay, because the problem with nowadays attacks in the networks, they keep morphing on a day-to-day basis. So how the attack was looking yesterday, or the payload was looking yesterday, today will be different, tomorrow will be different. So the firewall is actively scanning for these new behaviors and also updating them in its own database. So come fast forward, it has a database, so it will always be scanning these threats against the database. So the next security feature on the bundle is the antivirus. This is the one I was talking about. So normally it scans files and traffic, for malware before they enter the internal network. So as I said, it's not waiting to capture this at the endpoint at your laptop or your computer or your phone. At this point, it's scanning all these malwares at the network level before it sends the traffic back to the PC. So normally what happens is, you might be browsing something, you send a request to a particular browser over the internet, and so if the hackers get wind of that, they might embed a malicious code inside the reply. So when for example you do a YouTube, you go to the internet and Google YouTube, on the browser, for example, they get wind of that. Now the request that is coming back from YouTube, it's already embedded with the malicious package inside. Yeah. So the firewall opens. That's why I was saying the firewall normally opens those packets and sees what is inside, and it corresponds it checks it with its database. So if it notices that is a very weird package inside your data, then it just drops that. So this is the network level antivirus. Okay, so at this point it's giving you almost a 95% security before it even gets deep inside into your network. So now this does not negate the need for an endpoint. An endpoint is still very important because of whatever gets through the network, through the firewall, but at least the firewall will have dropped a big percentage of that. It's not overwhelming your endpoints. Okay. Now, the threat intelligence. So this is more of what the firewall has on its database. So at this point, all these threats I'm talking about, every time it realizes, and because it's always running this these scans and inspections in the network. So every time it's running something new, it's learning something new. It updates that information on its own database. Now, it those these firewall licenses, they come with databases. So they have so many entries already that are pre-configured. So it sits inside your firewall. So normally because what traditional firewalls used to do is this database was somewhere in cloud. So if you buy a traditional or a stateful firewall, so most of these databases were sitting somewhere on cloud. So every time the firewall was getting something weird, or let me just use that word, it was sending that, it was querying the cloud, trying to compare that package. So at that point, first of all, it was causing it will cause delays, and some things will actually pass through. But now with these firewalls, all that information, the data is sitting locally on the device, so it's very fast. It drops the packets in real time. You don't have to get a delay. It will actually just drop that request, that packet. So that's what threat intelligence is. So it gives you, your network is fast, the efficiency. You don't want a network that is slow because the firewall is trying to query this request from somewhere on cloud. So we also have application control. This is very important, and this is one of the features that most admins, I would call them admins, or guys who are using firewall, they want to control their way to control what's happening, what people are accessing. Yeah, they can decide people are watching out of YouTube during work hours, so they want to block that. Yeah, the people are visiting some very funny websites. Maybe people are still gambling while still at work. So this is where you actually enforce that kind of control. So application. So the two, they have something in common. So application control normally, the firewall has a record of this. It has a very big database, as I said. We are going to see that. So it has all these applications in its entry. So it already has YouTube, it has WhatsApp, Facebook, TikTok, call them torrents, all this. It has thousands of these sites in it. So literally you just go there and type what you really want to block, and you're already going to find that app there. If it's not there, maybe it's a new app that has been launched or it's not official yet, you can still enter it into the database. So it gives you that kind of control. Websites the same, because for example there is a YouTube app, and also you can access the YouTube via the browser. Those are two different ways. So the URL normally it blocks the domains at that point. So two things are helping you do the same thing. Okay, so you are still able to block. So it gives you at least some absolute control of what people are actually browsing. And as well, now this one helps people manage their bandwidth, because most of these applications or websites are traffic or throughput intensive. They consume a lot of bandwidth while people are doing that. So if you realize you've got so many people who are utilizing your network bandwidth with most of these things, you can either block them or even limit their bandwidth. So those are the firewall, the five firewall features, security features that come in the bundle. So this, it does not matter whether you're buying the Z3200S or you're using the Z5100S. This comes in very standard. Once you purchase the security license, you're going to get this as part of the firewall. Yeah, so that's that for the security features. So now this is beyond that. So at the end of the day, our RIGI firewalls are still RIGI network devices. So what that means is you can manage and control them or even monitor them through the RIGI cloud, which at this point we all know RIGI cloud is free for life. So once you register to RIGI cloud, you're able to monitor all your network devices, be it access points, be it network switches, be it network gateways, home routers even, but also the firewall. So as much as the firewall is what it is, it's, you can still monitor it. So one thing for this is it negates the need for having to request public IPs. Sometimes it becomes a very long process requesting public IPs from your providers, or maybe even paying a premium for that. With this, you can still access without a public IP, with or without, you can still access and manage your firewall remotely via RIGI Cloud. So it is still regarded as a network device. So you are still going to manage and monitor everything via the RIGI Cloud. And actually, this is what I have. So in my network, because as you guys know at this point, I normally do presentation with the physical setup. So I actually have a firewall as part of my network here. So let's just get into that and actually go through the interface. And yeah, so this is my live project here. So I have a Z30-200S in my setup. All right, so this is what I was saying. At this point I don't really need a gateway. My firewall is doing all the routing. So at this point it is a gateway, but also enforcing the policies. So I'll use it to enforce my policies. Now, unlike other network devices, with the firewall you cannot do much on the RIGI cloud. Yeah, so what you can monitor is limited, unlike the gateways where you can enforce end-to-end policies or all the features on cloud. With the firewall is a bit limited. So you can do the very basic, but it still needs you to log into the local device to enforce most of these things. So at this point you can just do the interface configuration. So maybe the network settings or the LAN settings. You can do very basic routing, DNS configurations, a few of securities. Yeah, you can see some securities I'm already running here. But beyond that, now you need to tunnel. Now the assumption is I am at home, but I need to access this project. Maybe I've gotten a call. I've received a call from the on HR or someone. I need to block something immediately, so I don't even need to go back to the office. So long as I have internet wherever I am, I can be able to access my RIGI clouds from anywhere and tunnel into the firewall. So that's what I'm doing. So at this point, I'm not logging in using the local IP address. I'm literally tunneling from outside the network. And that's one of the beauty of RIGI. It gives you value for money like that. You do not need to worry about management, network management, because building a network is one thing, running and maintaining the network is the bigger part. So RIGI Cloud offers you value as compared to most of other vendors. Yeah, so this is what the interface looks like. This is the home interface. Now, the disclaimer here is I have not activated any licenses here on this firewall. I'm still using it as a router at this point. Now, that's why you're seeing most of these things are blank. Now, if you log into a very live firewall that has all the features activated, you are going to see data here, real-time data. So it normally shows you the kind of attacks that are happening at this point. You are going to see even the sessions. You're going to see for example, these are the sessions here. You are going to see the data usage. Okay, so you actually know, for example, for the attacks, you are going to know what kind of attacks you are receiving in your network. So the firewall is always going to be updating you in this interface. Now, on this panel we have a few menus that allows you to do most of these features. So now, as you can see, most of these one are not on the RIGI cloud. On the RIGI cloud here, it's a bit limited. Okay, but now if you want to go deeper, dive deeper into configurations, this is where you do it. Now it has the web UI, but also people who like uh, tunneling and using the CLI, they can still do. You can still SSH into the firewall. But for someone who doesn't want to code most of these things, they just want to use the UI. You can do that here. Okay, so I'll just go briefly through most of these options just for you guys to familiarize yourself with the interface. Okay, so back to what I was saying. So once you activate the licenses, you get this data in real time. So you're going to be getting the number of attacks you're getting in your network, you know, and also you're going to be getting the sources. So if, for example, for some reason you have a device in your network, a laptop that is infected and is sending malware, is sending spam emails, you're going to even see the IP address of your device doing that. So at that point, you already know there's a compromised device in your network, or if attacks that are coming from outside, you're still going to see them from this point. Network. So this is more of the monitoring interface. So at this point, you don't enforce most things, anything literally. You just view what's happening. So for example, this is my data usage. This is my traffic. You can see even the IP addresses. So you already know this guy is browsing the traffic usage, the traffic usage, the traffic usage. Yeah. So if it was a live deployment where people are using your network literally, so you're going to see what they are doing here. Okay. Sessions, the same. So it says sessions is more of ports. Okay, and the sessions. So you're going to see if they are doing YouTube, what they are doing, the protocols here. So you're talking about the protocols and the ports. Okay, you can see most of this data, which becomes very, very useful for someone running or managing a network. You just don't want to build a network and run it blindly. You need information to see what's happening. Logs, security logs, the same. Now, I was talking about a hard disk. This is where a hard disk comes in handy. Okay, most of these logs, so the firewall comes with its own memory, but it's limited. You do not want to deplete your firewall memory, storing logs. So if you need logs, but because logs are important, so you need logs for maybe 2, 3, 4 months, you need a hard disk to do that. Also, for you to be able to do deep network scans, that's where the hard disk comes in, because it adds extra resources to your network. Yeah, so you can actually see most of the logs literally. So a hard disk comes in handy. So you'll be able to come here and see what was happening at any given point. Okay. Yeah, the VPN logs like that. All this. So if you have, for example, you have tunnels here. I don't have any. If you have tunnels, you're going to be seeing what's happening in those tunnels. You have SSL clients that are accessing the network from outside. You're going to see what they were doing, who joined the network when. Becomes very important, as I was saying. Fault diagnostics. If there's a problem with the network, this is where you run most of those things. Okay. So really, they've bundled things in these different modules. So for example, policies. Now if you want, this is where now you actually enforce most things. This is where you enforce most things. So this is where now control comes in. So don't mind, these are just some of my things that I was trying to work with. So for example, let me just open one here, one policy. Yeah, so let's say you want to block YouTube. Let me just use YouTube. Is one of the popular uh, sites. So if I wanted to block YouTube from my network, so just enable that policy group, the interface. Okay, let me just create a new one so you can see how it flows. Okay, so also there is a simulation space here, a sandbox. We can call it a sandbox. So if you're not so sure about what that policy you want to create is going to affect your network, or you don't want to run to implement that policy at night, because most people have to come back at night, to implement most of this. That's where the simulation sandbox come in, but I don't want to do that. So if I was told to block YouTube, just call it that. You can create policy groups. So this is where you want it to come before. So you can say it comes before internet. Okay, because you can create hundreds of policies, but as you know, how the firewall understand traffic. So normally it ticks. So for example, if you have 5 policies, it start affecting with the first policy. So if you decide to block internet entirely as your first policy, that's it. All the other policies are disregarded. So you need to arrange your policies carefully so that you do not cause outages. So the source security zones. Okay, let's call it trust, because people are accessing YouTube from my local network. Okay, any region, does not matter. Destination and trust. So this is people accessing YouTube which is outside the internet. It's on the untrust zone. Destination address is any. Okay, so service is any. Okay, let me see. Yeah, so this is where you have all your applications inside. So as I said, Ruiji comes with a very detailed database on the firewall. So for example, I want to search YouTube. I just search YouTube here. If I search YouTube, so YouTube is under social media. Yeah, here it is. Just come to that side. Let's say you're trying to do Facebook, the same. Yeah, here it is. Okay. So yeah, so this is where you are trying to enforce all these things. So if you have a firewall at this point, you will need to have activated most of this if you have the subscription anyway. But now the actual application. Okay, so if you're trying to block any application, name it. Let's just use anything. TikTok. You're going to see most of this. They already have a database for that. Okay, TikTok. Let's say, which other one can I use? Let me see. Torrent. Yeah, BitTorrent for people who are torrenting in your network. So you can search them. So it can actually show you here. You have 7,900 entries to search from. So those are so many apps. These are some of the official apps that are already live and hosted. Yeah, online gamings, for example. Yeah, 1xbet. So you can decide your people are not going to be betting while at work. Okay, so most of this. So you can do so many. You can confirm. Okay, now that is the application. Now what about some of the unregistered URLs? So some of these sites are not applications. Yeah, so they're just hosted somewhere in a domain. That's where the URL comes in. So you can manually add the URL. Okay, so if this is not official, it's not officially hosted, but it is a domain. So you can decide block YouTube, for example. Yeah, so you can just come here and do youtube.com, youtube.com, and copy that URL here. Yes. Yeah, so you can decide to block. So you can continue adding them. So most of these unregistered sites, but they are hosted, you can add them here. Okay, so now if I enforce this policy, if I play around with this policy, it's a very live policy. So if I actually save it and I have gotten something not correct here, it's going to take effect immediately. So it might actually drop my network. So that's where the policy sandbox comes in. So before you actually click the save and drop your whole network, yeah, that's where you know this. You're not so sure. Let me just do this after maybe block policy. So this pushes that policy down to the last. Let me make sure I'm on the correct Wi-Fi. All right. Okay, I need that template. configure file. Okay, yeah, so I've enabled the file filtering, but I haven't configured a template. So these are the things. Now with a firewall is very user specific. It depends with what you really want to block in your network, the policies you need in your network. So this is a very holistic introduction. So whatever you really need, you know what you need to block in your network. Yeah, let me take this down to the move to one. Okay. Yeah, all right. Yeah, so it is very holistic. So, but as I said, it depends with really what you want to block in your network. Needs are not the same. Needs are not the same. Okay. So the simulation sandbox comes in very handy. So the same goes with most of this. Yeah. So now when you have the licenses, the subscription licenses, you can now come and enforce most of this. Yeah, you already know, and most of this information you're going to get from the firewall itself. You know, on the dashboard where you are seeing the kind of threats you are receiving. Yeah, now that one guides you on what you need to add, the type of defense you need to add into your network. Session control. Yeah, so yeah, you can decide what you need to block in the sessions. Let's do block list and allow list. You need to block a few devices in your network. Maybe for whatever reason, you can come here and block the source or the destination, whatever. So at this point now, it's where you get the actual control. Port scanning, you can scan the network and see the type, the ports that people are visiting. So for example, this is a scan I had done earlier. So this is actually my PC. We come here and view. I'm going to see actually all the requests I've do. So I'm actually using TCP protocol. So some requests you're going to see UDP here, and now you can see the port numbers. Yeah. So this is where the vulnerability comes in. These port numbers, this is where hackers actually utilize. This is what they are looking for. So most of these port numbers are very, especially these 445, 443. These are very vulnerable in your network. So if a hacker actually gets winds of this, most of these are very unsecure. They are open ports. Yeah, and this is what you actually block in your network, something like that. So you can create a policies around these port numbers. So if it's a big network, we are going to get a very detailed, entry of the ports people are using, and now you can block the unsecure ports. Traffic learning, the same. Let me just do nothing. So this is where address translation happens. Yeah, so once a request goes out, so for example, my IP address is 192.168.1.5. When I'm browsing the internet, it's going out as my public IP, not as my local IP. This is where the NATing happens. Also very important. Yeah, and a lot of things. Port mapping, I can see ALG here. For people who have problem with SIP services, you can enable or disable this SIP ALG. It's all about NATing, literally. Yeah, I had disabled the SIP ALG. So many features, so many features. Let me just maybe look at. Okay, John, you're asking, does Ridge Firewall also block VPN tunnel traffic on client and user devices? Mhm. If I already have a Ridge gateway on the network, why should I get a firewall when the gateway does most of the traffic filtering and application blocking for me? Yeah, so that's the thing. If all you need is blocking blocking traffic, or maybe bandwidth management, and you just need people to block, not to access some of the sites, then a gateway is enough for you. For example, our Ridge gateways as well, they do most of these things. What they do not have is the security itself. So things like the things I talked about, the IPS, the antivirus, the antivirus, what was the other one? The next generation deep packet inspection. So that's the only thing you cannot get from a gateway. But a gateway gives you most of this control. Well, nowadays most of these gateways allows you to do that. So you go for the firewall when what you actually need is security, not traffic blocking. Okay, so for the first one, does Ridge Firewall also block VPN tunnel traffic and user? Yeah, so it depends with how you do that, because as I said, you can actually monitor the users that mhm, where was I? You're able to monitor the traffic, yeah, traffic control here. You're able to block all the users that are authenticating into your network. You can block. You can block. Where was that? You should be able to block most of this. Yes. So the answer is yes. The answer is yes. We're going to go back to that. Let me just finish on the features of the firewall. Yeah, so this is where you normally do the routing. So this is the interface where most of the routing and the network features happen. Okay, so the physical interfacing. So for example, if I had another ISP, another link, so you can just come here and edit one and add your IP addresses. All right, so these are the modes we were talking about. So by default, they come in routing in transparent mode. You do routing and trust one interface. You can assign yourself the IP addresses, most of the manual tasks anyway. So if you do that, they also Ridge comes with load balancing between ISPs as an enabled feature. So anytime you actually plug in another ISP, Ridge will do the load balancing automatically. So for example, yeah, so this is it. So by default, not unless you authorize it not to do that, and it does the. So maybe you just need backup. Maybe you need a main link and a backup link. You can decide to do that, but by default it comes with load balancing between ISP links as a default. DHCP. So most these are the things now you're going to get on. You're going to get on a gateway, on a router. So this is actually where you configure your tunnels. So but you don't customize, you don't do bandwidth management here. So this is purely just creating tunnels. Yeah, so if I want to do an IPsec, okay, um, okay, yeah, so this is where now you start creating the tunnels. So yeah, Luigi supports at the moment it just supports SSL VPN for client to site VPNs and IPsec between site to sites. Now, while at that, um, they've also introduced SD1 for people who are using MPLS, and MPLS, as we know, is quite costly. So people who are using MPLS, they've launched the Rigi SD1 between sites. So Rigi Firewall and also the Rigi gateways are supporting the SD1. So if you don't need the VPN tunnels, but you need sites interoperability. So you need maybe HQ and branches to be able to communicate and share resources. SD1 is there for you. So if I can actually show that. So if I was to do, so this is where the Rigi SD1 normally is on these services. So it's called AnyLink. AnyLink is the Rigi SD1 solution. So if I was to add an SD1 group, yeah, I can call it group 1. So this would be maybe between your HQ and branches, a few of them. So you can decide how they are sharing the resources. So if you need everything to be converging at the HQ, you use the hub. Okay. All right. No, what did I use? Okay. Yeah, so this is my firewall. So the firewall supports. So if your network does not have a RIG gateway that supports SD1 or firewall, you won't see the project. So I can already see my project here. So I can select that. I can even select, let me see, there's one. Our EG1510 access as well does that. So with these two Yeah, so with these two, I can create an SD1 group and start sharing traffic through the two. So sometimes you actually don't need a VPN. This one, depending on your needs, you can use the SD1 as well to do your sites between your sites. The only requirement here is at least you need one public IP, one site to have a public IP, just as the VPNs do. You need at least one site to have a public IP. Okay. Yeah. Tony, you're asking how do I see live and also set limit for them to download. This if I got you correct, how do you see live? So this is more of the bandwidth management, yeah? I assume you're asking about bandwidth management. So bandwidth management, you are still going back to the seeing the traffic and the sessions. Okay, so real time. So for example, so this is where you're going to be seeing live data. So you're able to see the throughput, the data, the bandwidth consumption. So you are seeing these are the sessions, as I said, but now these are the actual usage of the network. So if, for example, this guy is doing 2 or 3 of even 5 Mbps worth of traffic, now you can actually come and dig deeper and see what he's actually doing. So this is the statistics. So this is where you see the applications. Yeah. So if he's doing, so for example, you can see WhatsApp. I'm doing a live meeting. So this is my live meeting on Google Meet. So that's why you can see the traffic here. Yeah. So you will know what someone is doing. You'll know what someone is doing. You will see TikTok here. You see YouTube. I already even have YouTube here. Yeah. So based on this data, now you can decide whether this guy needs to be blocked or not. Now, for example, if for whatever reason YouTube, this guy is I'm doing a lot of YouTube and you need to block that. Now that's why you come to the policy where I was here at policy and create a policy to block that. Firewalls do it differently than the gateways. Gateways, you can do that on cloud. It's very easy to do it on cloud. So for example, let me use this. Yeah. So in this setup, this is a demo project. If I was to do that, I need to come here, inflow and application control. So this is a bit easier compared to doing the firewall. As I say, the firewall is a bit different. So this is where you'd come and do YouTube now. Okay, YouTube. So yeah, you just can do. Yeah, so that's if your network was running on a gateway, that's how you do it. I've already blocked YouTube in this demo project, but on a firewall, you come and do it as a policy like that. Yeah, so you can limit. So at that point, so with the firewall, you cannot limit the bandwidth. You cannot decide now YouTube they are going to use 2 kbps. It's either you block or permit like that. Okay. Yeah. So because of time, I can see time is way past. So that's what you get on the firewall. Now, as I said, this is very holistic introduction. If what you really need is to get one of these devices and spend time with it, and enforce most of these things, test them, try them. With a firewall, you really need to know what you want to do to block, or the policies you need to pass through. For example, John, what you needed is just filtering traffic and maybe blocking applications. For you, maybe a gateway is enough. Yeah, but if you need now to protect, you have very sensitive networks. You really don't want to compromise on security. That's where now the firewall comes in. It gives you the added security features into your network. All right. Yeah. So not unless there's any question. So that's that for the firewall. So this was just 2.0. We are going to be doing more of this and maybe going deeper. We can even decide one day we just want to do a webinar and focus on a very particular on a very specific topic. Now we can go deeper into it, and probably at that point I might even have a firewall security updated, or updated the license updated on my firewall, so we can actually see most, how the firewall is doing most of these critical installations in the networks. All right, maybe I can just show us the different packages. Just a moment, let me share this. Yeah, so these are the different licenses. So for example, the first one is the firewall, the Z200S, that's the hardware. And also now the two are hardwares actually. So the Z3200S is the hardware, the Z5100S is the hardware. Now this is the hard disk. Now RIGI is very sensitive. You cannot just use it with any other generic hard disk. You need a RIGI hard disk, otherwise it won't work. Now look at these blue licenses. These are the security licenses. Yeah, this is the one I was talking about, where you get IPS, antivirus, application control, URL registration, and real-time threat intelligence for both firewalls. So you're getting the same features, just that they are tailor-made for the different models. The last ones are the expansions for the capacity. The ones I was talking about, you can push your firewall performances by adding these licenses. So this is what, so normally when you're getting a quote from either Kenya or Uganda, you're going to get a quote separate for the hardware and a quote separate for the license, depending on what license you need. Yeah, so yeah, that's that. Thank you so much for your time. Whoever hadn't scanned this. Okay, let me check. I think there's a question. So you can, whoever had scanned, you can just go ahead and scan it just to check in. Right, so Tony, you're asking, does the firewall allow more than one network port? Yes. That's what I was explaining, the load balancing feature. So you can take, it can take a maximum of, actually, you can take a maximum of even 7. I think 8 actually. You can, if you have 8 links for whatever reason, you can configure those. Most of those ports, they are switchable between LAN and WAN. So depending on your on your capacities, the number of links you have, you can have this. And this is what I was talking about. You can decide to load balance between the two. So if you're getting 50 Mbps from one ISP and 100 from the other one, load balancing is where at any given time you're utilizing both links. You're not just paying for one to stay dormant. But if you still need one to be dormant to act as a backup, you can still do that. So yes, to answer your question is RIGI definitely does that. All across, even the firewalls and the gateways. The gateways also allow you to have multiple ISPs or WAN links. Any other question?
Mike, I wanted to ask you a question.
Mm-hmm.
Do this firewall support high availability?
Availability, by availability you mean?
High availability, the HA configuration.
Mm-hmm. Actually, no, I'm not familiar with that concept. What I can do,
So maybe you can configure the firewalls in passive to passive mode or passive to active mode. I don't know if you can go back do a research on that, because I
yeah,
think
that's
other
fine.
firewalls I know they do.
Uh-huh.
Sophos does,
Uh-huh.
FortiGate does, but
Uh-huh.
I've never seen a feature with the ROIG firewalls.
Okay.
Mm.
Yes, Resty.
Michael, at the beginning, you talked about the 3 modes in which you can
Uh-huh.
do the configuration. Are those the modes he's talking about, or he's talking about the different modes?
I'm not so sure because ours is mostly the operation mode. Because what I was talking about was the either you can do it in routing mode, you can do it in transparent or bypass modes. But Phineas is asking about high availability. Now, not unless is Ambrose here, maybe he has interacted with the Sophos and the FortiGate, he can let us know how we do it or if we have that feature. But in the meantime, Phineas, I think I have your number. I will definitely look into that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So I'm going to reach out once I have the feedback for that.
All right.
Yeah. Otherwise, thank you so much, guys, for your time.